You can read the entire Gospel of Mark in about an hour if you go straight through. I tried it again this week, and it's true. Start at the beginning in a Bible you have at home or online, and then about an hour later, you'll have gotten a sweep of Jesus' life, comings and goings, as told by Mark, the first written version we have in the Bible. And after reading, tell me what you think. Because we've now entered the season of Mark, where churches all over the world will be reading little pieces of Mark every Sunday. Little snippets are good, but if you spend just 1 hour and journey through it all at once, one gets a whole different perspective. During today's welcome, I said we would be talking a lot about feeding and healing, and that I hoped you'd leave this service a little more fed, a little more healed. So much of Mark is about Jesus healing and feeding people. Now, we might think of Jesus foremost as a preacher or a teacher or the divine that we need to believe in lest we end up in hell. But from reading the whole of Mark, you'll get a very different sense. In Mark, Jesus doesn't talk about hell at all, or maybe just once. It's just not his focus. And yes, Jesus preaches and teaches in the sense that he tells stories, parables, but his own disciples never figure them out. The focus of Mark is on Jesus' healing and feeding, and all the trouble he got into because he focused on healing and feeding. As I read this week, I jotted down these examples from Mark. You and I can compare lists. In order, Mark describes Jesus healing a man in the synagogue, then going to Peter's house where he heals Peter's mother-in-law of a fever. And that night, he heals throngs of people who all come crowding into Peter's house. The word is spread about Jesus. They go on to another town, and Jesus next heals a leper by touching his skin. He heals a paralyzed man whose friends are so intent on getting him before Jesus that they lower him down through a hole they make in the roof. Next, Jesus heals a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath, and a man who lives in a graveyard, howling and often hurting himself. Jesus cures a woman who has become impoverished because she has hemorrhaged blood for 12 years without ceasing, and no one can cure her. Jesus then heals 2 little sick daughters. One, the child of the man Jairus, a highly placed synagogue leader, and the other, a little Gentile daughter of a nameless foreign woman. Jesus heals a blind man, a deaf man, and one who has convulsed all his life since childhood. And maybe in some way, Jesus has healed you too. The other unmistakable feature of Jesus' life was food. He loved it. Twice when out in the countryside, seeing big crowds far from home and hungry, he urged them to sit down. He took what his friends had collected and that he personally had now, a few sandwiches, and he broke them up to share, giving it all away. And thousands ate that day, returning to him and to the disciples leftovers. And Jesus would eat with anyone. He'd eat with sinners. He'd eat with Jewish traders who did all that dirty work for the Romans, collecting the hated taxes. He was welcoming of all the riffraff and beggars. The Greek word calls his crowds the desperately destitute. Maybe those forced to eat from garbage cans or stand ashamed month after month in a food line. In the passage that Anne read today, that's the scene that we're seeing. The house is so crammed with these riffraff, these people who want to be healed and fed, that no one can move. You know that feeling. You might have stood at a crowded concert or a political rally or the Women's Day March on Boston Common a few years ago. Everyone locked in place, others outside still pressing to get in. In fact, a few verses before what Anne read, Jesus has arranged to speak from a boat outside to protect himself from being crushed, we're told. But now he's at home and back inside, and the crush is immense again. The detail that we are given in Mark, which is memorable, is that it was so crowded that no one could even eat. Well, when your life's work is healing and feeding, this is a problem. The other thing afoot in the passage, of course, is that neither his clergy nor his family are supporting Jesus' ministry. Now, assume you were religious like Jesus. Wouldn't you want your clergy to uphold you for feeding and healing people? Assume you came from a loving family, as we think Jesus did. Wouldn't you want them in support too? Because it is hard work that Jesus is doing. And all of us need support when we take on the work of healing and feeding. Both groups of people Jesus would most want to support him when he does something honorable. His family and the clergy have instead turned on him. I've imagined what Jesus might have wanted to hear or would have heard. Jesus, we're so proud of you. You have God-given gifts, and you are using them to feed and heal others. You are not taking your talents and making money off them. It's frankly weird that you're not charging people anything for this medical care and food sharing. You know, that would be acceptable, ethical. And we notice you also haven't devised a crowd control system that gives those with the biggest checks the first places in line, like churches did. Like King's Chapel did early in its history. Those who pay the most get the best pew up front. But even if you did that, Jesus, it could be overlooked. After all, churches need to pay the bills. And giving honors in public to your biggest donors by name is always the best way to curry favor for them. Make sure everyone knows who gave the most. And Jesus, we do notice that you aren't even letting your nearest and dearest take advantage of all your popularity. Your disciples and, well, us, the Sibs, haven't yet become maitre d's, where we can accept the small token for getting the sick or hungry just a little closer to Jesus. Isn't your beloved family entitled to share your good fortune? That's the usual way things work. But you're not doing that stuff. In fact, we don't even know who feeds you. Not a word about that from Mark. Why aren't you thanking your sponsors? Their names prominent. It's strange your approach, Jesus. But of course we admire it. And all that time that you spend with people who can never pay you back, and that centered feeling that flows from you. Wish we could eat that sense of peace. Oh, just kidding. No, Jesus gets no accolades from his clergy or family. They call him insane, crazy to do what he's doing. In today's lesson, both the religious leaders and Jesus' own family are trying very hard to push their way past all those people who don't even know him. They want to be there to help Jesus, of course, by getting him to stop that madness, stop the free healing and feeding. Because what is wrong with what he's doing? Well, for one thing, Jesus heals on the Sabbath when no work should be done. He could just make people wait a day. That problem would be easily solved. And for another thing, Jesus keeps eating with unclean people, lepers, menstruating women, foreigners who aren't even Jewish. He even touches them. And then he doesn't wash his hands before worship. A simple courtesy to honor God. It's as if Jesus could care less about honoring God the way we've always been taught to do it. Soon he'll probably let some woman waste money on him, anointing his head with costly oil, rather than giving the money to the poor. He's not even thinking about the poor. I imagine that's what his family and some religious leaders are saying out loud about Jesus in that crowded room, that he fails to honor God when he freely heals and feeds starving and sick people. Only the devil would do that, right? It doesn't hold together. What's really going on? I think the whole thing is awkward for family and religious leaders. Jesus has this laser-like focus on feeding and healing, and he doesn't let anything get in the way of that. The clergy have a different way. They stand back a few rows and give away some alms to the poor, but they can't spend actual time with the destitute garbage pickers because, well, those folks are impure. You know, that is why in the Good Samaritan story, the Levi and the rabbi have to skirt around the bloody man on the side of the road. I mean, bleeding, that makes him impure. And who could start the 11 o'clock service on time after that? Yes, the clergy have a useful system that's good enough, maybe, though, a step back from Jesus. Clergy have agreed that they will certify that people previously unclean because of their leprosy or bleeding or whatever, those people can get certification that they are clean enough to worship again. The religious authorities say, sure, come on up to the temple, and for just a little gift of money, we're happy to certify you ready. And, you know, when you come to pray at the temple, just give us that thigh piece or maybe the breast piece of the bird that you place on the altar. We would never ask for the whole thing, just a taste. How else would we eat? Here's the truth. Jesus is threatening. If his way of living catches on, he can ruin the system for all the rabbis and scribes. He can ruin the nepotism system for family and friends that encourage us, well, you know, place that needed phone call, hire people we know, who look like us, talk like us. But this Jesus, reading the whole sweep of the gospel, we see that he is not just intent on healing individuals and feeding individuals one at a time. Looking at the whole sweep, we see his broader plan, which is to heal the whole system of who's valued, who gets ahead, even who gets to be healed and gets to eat. Jesus wants to feed us not only with a loaf of actual bread made from grain. He also wants to feed us all with a thing for which we most hunger, knowing that we matter, that you belong, that whatever we've done in the past won't define us forever, that I and you and all of us are seen by God himself or herself, and having been seen, we're still loved beyond imagining. That's true wherever we live. It's true whatever our weight or our facial features or whom we love. It's true whether we have 1,000,000 educational degrees or none. All of us still known and loved. Jesus comes at the very beginning of Mark's gospel, declaring this good news, that the kingdom of God is very near. It was a shocking statement in those days, a huge affront to the real king, who was clearly in charge, Rome's Emperor Caesar. And it's even disrespectful of the Jewish kings then on the throne from Herod's family. God will be the real king soon? That's a big threat to the way things are done. An unacceptable threat, it turns out. But Jesus just strikes out, showing what God's kingdom looks like. And it looks like this: feeding and healing all God's children for free. Take the bread of life I give to you, he says to you and me today. Drink the cup of forgiveness. It's for you. Come, friends, for all is now ready. It's all here for free. It's all here right now. Amen.